Part 3. So what I've been showing you is that there are these issues that divide the Founding Brothers. And when I say divide, what we're really getting into is that they create political parties, which is you'll see when you do the Washington Farewell Address assignment, that's a key focus. That Washington's going to complain and say, hey, we have a problem, our unity is being threatened. And by large measure, he would say it's being threatened by these political parties. So what are we talking about? Well, the parties are going to split. This kind of splitting, as you can see, through all these things here that occurred, which, by the way, is not an aberration, right? The splitting is not, oh my gosh, we're doomed. The splitting is like, this is perhaps the norm relative to a discussion about what does it mean to be in a republic. So you're going to end up with, by the final split, 2 political parties. So the Founding Brothers will split into 2 groups. Now, some of the Anti-Federalists, remember I told you the Anti-Federalists largely kind of disappear and go away, but there were people who thought in Anti-Federalist ways who will join Jefferson and Madison in their Republican Party. And again, to restate, I don't care what website you look at, it's wrong if it tells you that they formed the Democrat-Republican Party. There's a couple of reasons why this is important. One, the evidence simply doesn't support it. They formed the Republican Party. They're very clear about that. And then 2, there will be a Democrat-Republican Party in the 1820s. And when it comes, I don't want you to miss it. I want you to see that event that happens. It's an event we'll talk about later that deals with Andrew Jackson and him running against John Quincy Adams. So save that for the 1820s. So the Republican Party. And then they're facing the Federalist Party. Now, the Federalist is a word that also confuses students because, as you remember, both Jefferson and Madison were Federalists. So what I want you to think of is not that they left that party, but think of the Federalist as a word with 2 definitions. The first definition is, as I said on the very first video, is the people who support the Constitution, to support the ratification. So there's that group. But by 1790, 91, it became clear that there was this new thing happening around Hamilton. And Hamilton is the leader. And he will form this thing called the Federalist Party. Now, many people got into the Federalist Party because either A, they didn't like Jefferson, or B, they loved Washington. But I do want you to notice that Washington is not in there. Neither is John Adams. And there's a whole document that I've got written for you that you should be able to find about were Washington and Adams part of a political party? And the answer is no, they never were. Adams and Washington represent what the founders really thought would happen when they set up the idea of a president, the chief executive. In their minds at the time they were writing, Madison would have agreed with this at the time. The idea was that the president would be somebody who was above party. In other words, in Madison, when he writes, I believe it's in Federalist number 10, but when he writes in the Federalist Papers, he acknowledges that it's going to be very tricky to maintain a republic over a large geographical expanse. It had never been tried before. The Roman Republic was just on the peninsula, which was really no larger than Florida by itself. And here they were going to do it in this whole continent. And just the East Coast alone was bigger than the Roman Republic. And certainly the whole of the way to Mississippi was gigantic. And Madison said then, look, there'll be differences of opinion. And what this will do is these different opinions will pull away from each other in a tension. They'll argue with each other. And he, in essence, alludes to, though he doesn't say this in the writings, but it's to this idea that if you think about a spider web, and there's a word in design for building, so architecture, called tensegrity. It's taking the word tension and tying it to the word integrity, that with tensegrity, and there were some people in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s began to build, kind of construction, not really buildings per se, but even a dome kind of gets to this, is that you can see in a spider web that as the strands pull apart from each other, and if you've ever seen a spider web and broken off 1 or 2 of the legs on one side, what happens? It loses its integrity of shape and kind of falls apart, and the poor spider's got to start all over again, right? So in tensegrity, and Madison's alluding to this, as the north-south, urban, rural, agrarian versus industrial, as these pieces happen, it will help maintain the republic. But what happens in the process is these 2 parties will become to dominate in such a way that what Adams and Washington will both find out is that unfortunately our politics can't work above these parties. The party partisanship will be too strong, unfortunately. And there's a moment in 1796 when that could have been saved. Adams will be elected our second president. And he will turn to Jefferson, who was elected the vice president. And he will say, and Adams, he believes Jefferson is his friend, and he doesn't really see Jefferson as the leader. In Adams' mind, Madison is the leader of the Republicans. So he's kind of missing Jefferson's involvement. And he'll say the two of us can be like a co-president, and we'll share the things. You as the vice president will have certain roles to play, including controlling all of our foreign policy. And I as the president will do a lot of things with domestic policy, and together we will occupy the shadow of Washington. And had Jefferson gone along with that, it would have been good. And it probably could have forestalled the political party's dominance. However, I don't think even that would have saved us. So you're going to have two political parties. And again, you're going to notice right here in the middle is not anybody. Well, this is where Washington and Adams would be. They're not a Federalist, and they're certainly not Republicans. So what do these parties believe? And this kind of comes out as you look at this first 12 to 16 years. So a couple different things. For the Republicans, governance should be at the state level. You're going to keep this in the back of your mind all the way through the Civil War. The idea of states' rights comes from this. The Federalist sees governing power, just like Hobbes, at the federal level. What did the government do? For the Republicans, as Jefferson says, good government is that which governs the least. Hamilton argues and counters a good government should be energetic, active, consistent. It should do things. Now, I would offer that even Hamilton could not have foreseen what our current government does. And when I say current, I mean the past, say, 60 years. The energy, the activity, the dominance, the oversight that the government has. Even Hamilton, I don't think, would have liked that. But regardless, that's what he thought. The government should be active. So again, you're seeing this kind of stay out of our business, Lockean view, no, be active, be involved, Hobbesian view. Geographically, now, both parties are in both areas, so it's a national. But if you were to look for the majority of Federalists are in the North, particularly New England, majority of the Republicans are in the South. Then that kind of leads to their view of wealth. For the Republicans, there's an old school view that wealth equals land. Jefferson's view of the country with that it would be across the continent, a bunch of small farmers. Oh yes, some plantation owners here and there, but basically everybody getting their wealth off of land. For the Federalists, Hamilton saw the future better. He said, no, it's going to become an industrial world, people living in urban cities and working in factories or at jobs, not owners and not, growing their own food. He's not foreseeing grocery stores, but he's in that ballpark. This idea that wealth equals cash, this is unheard of at this point in time. And it's largely considered like dirty. If you worked in a way and you made money off of other people's money, so like a banker, you were considered evil. It was not a good thing to do. The only people who made valuable work were people who worked with their hands. Of course, we can laugh at that looking at the Southerners and somebody like Jefferson because he never worked a day in his life. His slaves did all the work. But in their minds, that's them working. Right? Next thing is then, not surprisingly, because of South land, agrarian focus for like what the country should be, industrial focus, or you might hear the word mercantile, kind of merchants and this kind of thing for the Federalist. Internationally, pro-France because of the revolution in particular, because the French helped us. Pro-England, although they were our enemies, for Hamilton, England they're the king, they're the number one country, we should want to be like them. Particularly, we should want to be like them economically and financially. And then lastly, and this is an important thing which you can focus on a little later, there are some video clips in there that some students made for me which do a good job of explaining this, is they differed on how you view the Constitution. Is it seen as a strict construction or a loose construction? Think of it this way. Strict construction would say that the government can only do precisely and specifically things that the Constitution says it can do. If it's not mentioned, you can't do it. So a national bank, not mentioned, can't do it. They would then also argue health care for everybody or Social Security for everybody, that's not mentioned, you can't do it. The Federalists are on the side of what's called loose construction, where it basically says, unless the Constitution says that you can't do it, then all bets are off. You can do whatever, as you can see here, is necessary and proper within Congress. Congress is allowed to do those things, in that that's a good thing to do, and that's loose construction. You can see how a president or a government would like that, because then, hey, we want to have a bank. It's not in the Constitution, but they didn't say we can't have a bank. Let's do it. Hey, we want to have health care for everybody. Well, it's not in the Constitution, but they didn't say we can't do that. So it allows you to do a lot of things. which again, if you think the governing power should be governs the least, you're not going to like that. Okay, almost done. So it goes back then to this debate between these two documents, which I would argue is still our debate today, by the way. All right, some quick takeaways. The national unity is a myth. There's always going to be this division. Washington's call for political unity will be ignored. The French Revolution has a massive impact. Jefferson will betray Adams in 1796, and any hopes of kind of a country with no political power, that's over with. And then the question of how much political power should the government have, that remains unanswered. It's not going to be solved in the process. And so the splitting the Founding Brothers, really important thing for us to kind of see and understand. All right? All right, talk to you soon.